All right, good morning and welcome back. Today we're going to talk about Chapter 13, Section 1, Trails West, Mountain Men and the Rendezvous. Mountain men survived by being tough and resourceful and spent most of the year alone. So what we're looking at is these people who are kind of like the pioneers, the first individuals to go out west. And these mountain men, they're very resourceful, and they go out and they're actually the ones that kind of map the land, and they're the first to be out there, the first to go and see these places beyond the Native Americans, and they're the people that start sending back a lot of the information about these places to the people that are going to start making people want to move out west. Mountain men were connected economically to the businessmen who bought their furs. So most of these mountain men were trappers. That's why they were there. They were trapping different animals and then selling the furs on the market. And they had this system called the rendezvous system, which was set up by a man by the name of William Henry Ashley. And this picture that you see here at the bottom is actually a drawing of the rendezvous system. You can see there's Native American teepees there. So they would have this set place, Native Americans, mountain men, and then these businessmen from the east would show up at this rendezvous spot once a year for about 2 weeks, and they would, all the mountain men, Native Americans, whoever would show up, and they would trade their goods to the people of the east. A prearranged meeting place was set up in every spring between 1825 and 1840, and trappers traded furs for supplies. So they would come with their furs, and the furs would basically be their money. And then their money would buy them everything that they needed for a whole entire year. They'd get all the information they wanted for the 2 weeks. You know, they'd hear all the stories about what was going on out east. After those 2 weeks, bam, they're back off into the mountains, living another year, doing the same thing all over again. And then the cycle would just start all over. Mountain men open up the west. During the height of the fur trade, some streams were trapped so heavily that the animals were totally wiped out. You're going to see this happen. This happens in the east, and it's going to progressively happen farther into the west until, some of these animals were almost trapped to extinction. Many of the mountain men gave Americans a first-hand knowledge of the West. So this picture that you see here is called Beckwourth Pass. It was named after Jim Beckwourth, who is this mountain man right here. Another very famous mountain man is Jedediah Smith. These two were very well known. Beckwourth actually is a tracker and becomes a scout for the Army. And then Jedediah Smith, he's actually the first white man that actually sees South Pass. So the Native Americans knew where South Pass was, but he's the first American to actually see it. And then he gets that information back. So this actually makes it easier. Beckwourth and the South Pass make it easier for people to go west and make it into Oregon. And then the Beckwourth Pass helps people make it into the Sacramento River Valley in California. Many pioneers used the South Pass, which was publicized by Jedediah Smith. It was at a lower altitude and not covered with snow nearly as often as the North Pass. You know, the North Pass, which is what Lewis and Clark went through, you get to certain times of the year and it might be covered with 30 feet of snow. So, that could be a difficult pass to go through. Now, the lure of the West. Many people wanted to move to the West and take the land that was inhabited by the Native Americans. Many people called land speculators bought large amounts of land in hopes that its value would rise. So, they would buy the land in the West, often sight unseen, and then they would just hope that as people continued going out there, that the land would get more valuable and that they would eventually make money off it. Manufacturers and merchants soon followed west, hoping to earn money by selling the goods that settlers needed. Think about it. If you go along the Oregon Trail and you set up a store, and you're the only store within 100 miles, when people come in and they need goods, you could basically almost charge them anything you wanted and they would have to pay it. So you could make a lot of money. The only downside to it is it was dangerous because there wouldn't be much protection to you from the Native Americans or even people who were passing through who, could outnumber you. Now, the Trail to Santa Fe. This is William Becknell. Once Mexico gained its independence from Spain in 1821, they opened the borders to American traders that Spain had previously kept out. William Becknell went to Santa Fe and made a lot of money because the New Mexicans wanted new goods. So he starts in Independence, Missouri, which is where a lot of people start on the trails, or they come through on the trails that that are going west for the Oregon Trail, the Mormon Trail, and the Sacramento Trail. And he came back, and once he arrives back, he has this sacks and sacks. So somebody comes up and cuts the sacks, and gold and silver coins just pouring out. So now everybody wants to go. The following spring, he left for Santa Fe again with many covered wagons and was forced to take a desert route instead of through the mountains. So they took what was called the Cimarron Cutoff, which would save them a lot of time. The problem is it's a desert. They almost died. Luckily, they eventually came to a stream, which helped them survive. They did a few other things. We're not really going to talk about that. But they came back, and it worked, and this opened up what's called the Santa Fe Trail, and you had this constant now passing of these merchants through the trail. After he came back with a large profit, many people began to brave the 800-mile trail to trade goods. Now, Oregon Fever. Probably the most famous of the trails is obviously the Oregon Trail, and some of you may have even seen the game, the Oregon Trail. Hundreds of settlers began to move west to Oregon along the Oregon Trail, which ran from Independence, Missouri to the Oregon Territory. The earliest Americans in Oregon were missionaries such as Marcus and Narcissa Whitman, who made few converts among the natives, but gave glowing reports of the land, sparking many Americans to make the trek to Oregon. You know, cheap land, these reports from the people that live there on how wonderful things are, you know, wheat that's 10 foot tall and, you know, just bountiful food. And people who are looking for a new life and a better way to live, they want to go out there. So thousands of people are going to start making the 2,000-mile journey out to Oregon trying to claim land. Families had to join wagon trains for protection. So what you see here are these wagon trains, and this would be your cutoff, some going to the Mormon Trail, some going on the Oregon Trail. And basically what you see is you wouldn't just leave Independence, Missouri by yourself, because the trail was a very treacherous place, a lot of danger, Native Americans, you know, other types of things. If you got into trouble, you would be in serious trouble. So you would wait until a wagon train was going, and then the wagon trains would go, and through sheer numbers of people, they would protect themselves. And this is Marcus and Narcissa Whitman, who I was just talking about. Now, the Mormon Trail. The Mormons, or members of the Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints, were founded by Joseph Smith in upstate New York in 1830, and this is Joseph Smith. Now, they kept moving kind of further and further west. They eventually moved to Nauvoo, Illinois, which is down south a ways on the Mississippi border. And they own land, but a lot of the people in the area don't like the Mormons, and they don't like the way that the Mormons own all this land that some of them wanted. So Joseph Smith actually gets into a land dispute, and he ends up getting killed in the city of Nauvoo. So, but before this all occurred, he was trying to talk to the Mexican government to allow them to go into the Utah territory to start their own area, their own colony. Brigham Young, he becomes the new leader of the Mormons after Joseph Smith dies. Mexico says, yes, you can move into the Utah territory, so they head west. In 1847, about 1,600 Mormons followed part of the Oregon Trail to the Great Salt Lake and started a settlement there. Kind of the irony of all this is they move out there, they get their settlement, they're living in the government under Mexico. And there were some things about the Mormons that, like one of the things they believed in was polygamy, which was having more than one wife, and that was illegal in the United States. So you were having these issues with the government. And then ironically, 10 years later, the war of, or not even 10 years later actually, but you have the war with Mexico, and Utah ends up becoming part of the United States. That is it for Chapter 13, Section 1. If you have any questions, get a hold of me. Make sure you get the readings and the worksheets done. Have a great day.